Just before the first light touched the quiet streets of Clearwater, while most homes were still dark and the town seemed suspended between night and morning, a small roadside diner switched on its lights for another ordinary day. Inside Maggie's diner, the smell of fresh coffee slowly filled the air as Emma Blake tied her apron and prepared for the first customers of the morning. Emma was 25 years old, a hardworking waitress who had spent years serving breakfast to the same familiar faces who visited the diner every day. Life had not been easy for her. After losing her mother several years earlier, Emma had learned to support herself while working long hours just to keep up with rent and everyday expenses. But despite the difficulties she faced, the people of Clearwater always noticed one thing about her. Emma Blake never stopped caring about others. Outside the diner that morning, the road remained quiet and nearly empty. The town had not yet fully awakened. And walking slowly down the sidewalk toward Maggie's diner was a man that most people barely noticed. His name was Robert Hayes. He appeared to be around 70 years old, his shoulders slightly bent with age and his coat worn from years of use. His hands trembled lightly as he walked, and his shoes looked like they had traveled many long miles. To most people who saw him, Robert Hayes looked like a man who had fallen on difficult times. When he reached the diner door, he pushed it open quietly and stepped inside. Without saying much, he walked to the same corner booth near the window where the morning sunlight would eventually fall across the table. This had become his place. Most customers paid little attention to him. Some assumed he was homeless. Others believed he was simply a lonely man passing through town. But Emma Blake noticed something different about him. Each morning, when she poured his coffee, Robert Hayes thanked her with a polite nod. He rarely ordered much food, often just sitting quietly with his coffee while watching the room around him. Emma noticed the way his eyes sometimes drifted toward the plates of food passing by. It was not a look of jealousy or anger. It was simply the quiet look of someone who had grown used to going without things others took for granted. One morning, Emma made a simple decision. Without asking permission and without drawing attention, she prepared a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She carried it over to Robert Hayes' booth and gently placed it in front of him. "It's on the house," she whispered softly. Robert looked down at the plate in surprise. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then his tired eyes slowly lifted toward Emma, and she noticed something she had not expected. Tears had formed in the corners of his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. From that morning forward, something small but meaningful began to happen inside Maggie's diner. Every day, when Robert Hayes arrived and took his seat at the corner booth, Emma made sure he had something warm to eat. Sometimes it was eggs and toast. Other days it was oatmeal or pancakes. The meals were simple, but to Robert Hayes they meant far more than the food itself. Their routine quickly became part of the quiet rhythm of the diner. Customers came and went. Coffee cups were refilled. Conversations filled the room. And in the corner booth near the window, Robert Hayes would sit quietly while Emma Blake placed breakfast in front of him each morning. Months passed this way. Robert arrived every day at nearly the exact same time. He sat in the same booth. He drank the same cup of coffee. And he thanked Emma with the same quiet gratitude each time she brought him breakfast. To most people in Clearwater, he remained invisible. Some customers avoided eye contact with him. Others barely noticed him at all. In a small town where neighbors usually knew each other by name, Robert Hayes remained a mystery no one bothered to solve. But Emma Blake never treated him like a stranger. She greeted him kindly each morning. She made sure his coffee stayed warm. And even when the diner manager warned her that giving away food could cause problems for the business, Emma simply replied that it was only a plate of eggs and toast. "What harm could it do?" she said. Emma never imagined that her quiet kindness was being noticed by someone far beyond the walls of Maggie's diner. For nearly 6 months, the routine continued unchanged. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. The sun had just begun rising over Clearwater when Robert Hayes walked into the diner and took his usual seat by the window. Emma poured his coffee and returned to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the early customers. Everything seemed normal, until a dark vehicle pulled into the diner parking lot. At first, no one paid much attention. Cars often came and went during breakfast hours. But seconds later, another vehicle arrived. Both of them were black SUVs, sleek and unfamiliar against the simple surroundings of the small roadside diner. Inside Maggie's diner, a few customers began glancing toward the windows. Something about the vehicles felt unusual. The engines shut off. The doors opened, and several men wearing dark suits stepped out. The room grew quiet as the men walked into the diner. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere inside the small restaurant. They looked around briefly before walking directly toward the corner booth, toward Robert Hayes. The entire diner fell silent. Robert slowly placed his coffee cup down on the table as the men approached. One of them leaned closer and spoke quietly to him. No one else could hear what was said. Then something happened that no one expected. Robert Hayes stood up, but the man who stood was not the quiet, fragile figure everyone had grown used to seeing. He stood straight, confident, calm, and suddenly, he looked like someone completely different. Emma Blake watched from behind the counter, still holding the coffee pot in her hand. She could feel every pair of eyes in the diner shifting between the suited men and the old man who had been sitting in that booth every morning for months. One of the men turned toward Emma. He thanked her for the kindness she had shown to Robert Hayes over the past several months. Then he revealed something that left the entire diner in stunned silence. The man they believed was Robert Hayes was not homeless. In fact, Robert Hayes was not even his real name. The quiet old man sitting in that booth was actually Walter Lawson. Walter Lawson was a billionaire investor. And more surprisingly, he was the owner of Maggie's Diner. For months, Walter Lawson had been traveling across the country visiting his businesses without revealing who he really was. Instead of arriving with attention or announcements, he preferred to observe quietly. He wanted to see how people treated strangers when they believed no one important was watching. In Clearwater, he had chosen Maggie's Diner. He had walked in each morning dressed like an ordinary man and sat quietly among the customers who filled the restaurant. Most people ignored him. Some avoided him. But one person treated him differently. Emma Blake. She had offered him kindness without expecting anything in return. And that simple act meant more to Walter Lawson than any business report or financial meeting ever could. About a week after that morning, Emma returned home from work and found an envelope waiting on the table in her apartment. Inside was a letter signed by Walter Lawson. As she read it, her eyes widened with disbelief. Walter wrote that during his travels he had visited many businesses, but he had rarely seen someone treat another person with such genuine kindness. Inside the envelope was an offer that would change Emma's life forever. Walter Lawson had arranged a full college scholarship for her, and when she completed her studies, he offered her a management position at Maggie's Diner. At the bottom of the letter, Walter Lawson wrote something Emma would never forget. "Kindness is the rarest thing in business," he said, "and you proved it still exists." Emma Blake never believed she was doing anything extraordinary during those quiet mornings at Maggie's Diner. In her mind, she was simply helping someone who looked like he needed a warm meal and a moment of kindness. She never imagined that the man sitting quietly in the corner booth was actually Walter Lawson, a billionaire investor who had chosen to walk into his own diner disguised as an ordinary stranger. Yet that one small decision changed her life forever, proving that even the smallest act of kindness can travel further than we ever expect. So now the question is for you. If you walked into Maggie's Diner that morning and saw Walter Lawson sitting quietly in that corner booth, wearing a worn coat and drinking coffee alone, what would you have done? Would you have helped him the way Emma Blake did? Or would you have walked past like everyone else? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy powerful real-life stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories.